time for our spiritual food. You guys on Facebook, we were having a little chat about nutrition and releasing excess weight here on Zoom before we got going. So we are prepared, open, and ready to receive our spiritual food today. And we are so grateful that you are with us. So pull up your fork, your plate, get ready to be filled up. I'm Ann Leach. I'm the platform person for today, and I'm going to ask a special favor. If you would like this broadcast on Facebook, even love it for that matter, send us some stars, some hearts, share it with your friends. We really want the world to know that Unity of Joplin is here to serve in an even bigger and better way. And you can help by doing those simple things. Each time you sign on to our page, we'd love it if you'd share comments and just really engage with us. We want to hear your voice. And speaking of voices, oh my goodness, we were just talking about the opening video that we have for you, Ani DiFranco, and her video with her song Revolutionary Love.
I will tend my anger. I will tend my grief. I will achieve safety. I will find relief. I'll show myself mercy. I will show myself respect. Yes, and I'll decide when I'm ready to forgive, but not forget. And I will ask you, I'll ask you questions, and I will try to understand. And if you give me your story, I will hold it in my hands, and I will bring the life, the revolutionary life. I will bring the love, the revolutionary love. I will bring the love, the revolutionary love, the revolutionary love. Yes, and even if you hurt me, I will not shut down. No, you can't make me hate you and carry that hate around. Oh, I see no stranger, only parts of myself I don't yet know. Yes, and I'll see right through evil, to a wound too scared to show. I have the power to stay open. Yes, I have the power to be the one who I've been waiting for. Yes, the one who sets me free. Yes, I can bring the love, the revolutionary love. I can bring the love, the revolutionary love. I could bring the love, the revolutionary love, the revolutionary love. Yes, I could
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Annie, bring it on. We are open to some revolutionary love. What a perfect song for today's message. I love it. Love it. Love it. Thank you. Thank you. And I also love our own music team. You know them. You love them too. John and Gary and Jerry. Ah, what a blessing you are to us. And Michael, who is the tech wizard behind the scenes, bringing it to us and making it all work so beautifully. Thanks, guys. Good to see you this morning. And, we are also blessed by Jefferson Myers, who is the president of the Board of Trustees. He's hanging out in the chat this morning on Facebook. Any questions you have, anything you need, Jefferson is there for you today. Thank you, Jeff, for serving in that way. And as I said, I'm Ann. I'm the platform assistant, just kind of helping things roll along this morning. And Reverend Gordon will be bringing the meditation and the lesson today. Thank you, Gordon. Look forward to it. But before we get there, just a few announcements. We have, even though we haven't been able to be together in person, we still have so much going on. And I wanted you to know that our Earth Care team is, first of all, going to be continuing the Meatless Monday program throughout this month of March. And we would love to hear from you if you are participating. Why? Why is this important to you? Why are you making this choice to participate in Meatless Monday? And if you haven't made that choice, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to pop in. If you haven't visited that page in a while, unityofjoplin.org/meatless, I just updated a bunch this morning. Made it a little easier to use, easier to print. You can go to the individual recipes and print those out a lot easier.
Good, good. And I still need to submit a couple of recipes, and you guys, you can submit recipes too. But if you need to get started and you need some ideas, there are some good recipes there, believe me. So Jefferson's putting that link into the chat, and check it out. And then do take the time to really reflect on your why. Why are you choosing to participate? What is it doing for you? How are you feeling as a result? And I know Novella was going to put something in the Zoom chat too. So yeah, check it out. We'd love to have your participation. And we're also continuing our aluminum recycling efforts. Just all you have to do is just separate your cans, any aluminum that you have. We would be happy to take it, bag it up, and you can just drop it in our can, which is at the back of the church in the alley. Just drive through, drop it in, and help us, we get a few extra bucks out of it. So I think it's a great service. And also others may take it and do the same. That's fine. We appreciate that. Speaking of food, oh my gosh, we were talking about nutrition. Saturday night is this food fight. I love this. High stakes cakes. Oh boy. It sounds like a lot of fun. There are about 70% of the tickets available to be sold. And here's the deal. We're providing the space at the church, but this group is very conscientious about social distancing and taking care of COVID precautions. So it would be a safe space and a wonderful evening to support the camp. It's a fundraiser and a really fun way to support them. So if you'd like tickets, there is their website down there under the date. And yeah, check it out. I think it'll be a lot of fun. And you've been hearing Gordon talk. There's going to be something special coming up Easter Sunday.
Oh, real quick.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was
It's
muted.
okay.
I just wanted to pop in and say that Mintahama used to be a Girl Scout camp.
Yes.
A lot of the women my age have fond memories of going there. The future is going to be open to everyone. It's not going to be just a Girl Scout camp.
Oh,
It's
cool. Yeah,
going to be things over there. So it's a good idea to support them.
definitely. Definitely. And if you can't be there on Saturday, you can make a donation. That would be nice. Yeah. But back to Easter Sunday, we're going to be together safely outdoors at the church on our side lawn for a really special Easter Sunday service. We are going to need some volunteers for that service. You can just message Gordon if you're willing to participate. I saw something in the newsletter about our opportunity to be a star with some acting, maybe. So Gordon will have all those details. And we are going to ask you to bring your own blanket or chairs so that the church chairs don't get ruined. We're anticipating, they'll kind of sink into the ground a little bit. So you might want something softer to sit on. So bring a towel, a blanket, whatever. And we affirm good weather and a very special Easter Sunday together. Okay. All right. I feel like I've just been rambling, but I'm not even a reverend. But we have a lot going on, as you can see. But right now, we want to welcome you again and invite any of you to stay on Zoom after the service for some virtual fellowship. I'll also say that your board of trustees will be going into an afternoon retreat and planning session for our future. If you have any ideas on how you'd like us to serve even more, drop those into the chat. Jefferson is taking notes, okay? We'd love to hear your voice, your ideas on how you would like to see Unity serve the community post-COVID. All right. Take a breath with me and just center into your chair as we prepare for our worship and our time of spiritual nourishment. We start that today thanks to Kim. Kim is going to share our Lenten reading for this week, the Sabbath. Yeah, you're muted.
Yeah, I should unmute myself. Anyways, I said thank you, Anne, and good morning to everyone. And this is the Sabbath. And this reading is taken from Mark chapter 2, verses 23 to 28, and Mark chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. One Sabbath, he was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need of food? He entered the house of God when Abiathar was high priest and ate the bread of the presence, which it is not lawful for any but the priest to eat. And he gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, 'The Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath.' Again he entered the synagogue, and a man was there who had a withered hand. They watched him to see whether he would cure him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man who had the withered hand, 'Come forward.' Then he said to them, 'Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to kill?' But they were silent. He looked around at them with anger. He was grieved at their hardness of heart and said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately conspired with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him." The true Sabbath is the consciousness that we have fulfilled the divine law in both thought and act. The Sabbath is a very certain, definite thing. It is a state of mind that man enters or acquires when he goes into the silence, into the realm of spirit. There he finds true rest and peace. The seventh day means the seventh or perfect stage of one's spiritual unfoldment. Man had become so lost in the darkness of sense consciousness that he could not save himself. So the Savior came. When man lays hold of the indwelling Christ, the Savior, he is raised out of the Adam consciousness into the Christ consciousness. He then enters the seventh stage of his unfoldment, where he finds sweet rest and peace. The Sabbath as an institution was established by man. God does not rest from his work every seventh day, and there is no evidence that there has ever been a moment's cessation in the activity of the universe. We do not quarrel with our brother over the observance of the Sabbath. If he says we should worship God on the seventh day or on the first day, in either case, we acquiesce. Not only do we do God's service in praise, song, and thanksgiving on the seventh day and the first day, but every day. In the true Sabbath, our mind is turned to God every moment, and we are ever ready to acknowledge his holy presence in our heart and life. The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. I affirm, I rest in the consciousness of the true Sabbath, and my heart is filled with joy and satisfaction.
I love that affirmation. Thank you, Kim. Really powerful words today. Thank you. We are going to continue our service with a song from John and Jerry, and that will be followed by Gordon's meditation. So this is your opportunity to prepare for that time of meditation.
Justice and mercy are its theme, and I will give it back to you. The kind of fast you've chosen, Lord, it must reach out to broken lives and to the poor. So change me, Lord. I know you are the orphan's hope. I know you are the widow's song. Oh Lord, you're showing me what's on your heart. You've put a new song in it is a hymn of praise to you. Justice and mercy are its theme, and I will give it back to you. Lord, I won't bring an empty soul. It's meaningless without compassion in my life. And holiness, your Father, where no Father lives, and to the lonely you're a friend. Oh Lord, you're showing me what's on your heart. You've put a new song in my mouth. It is a hymn
And as we think about a new song, a song of justice and mercy, a song of revolutionary love, we enter into a time of conscious union with divine mind, with one another, with all hearts that seek love, with all souls that give forth justice and mercy. Breathing into this moment of unification, I invite you to open your heart, open your mind, and allow these words to be the words of Spirit. I choose this day to begin the practice of revolutionary love. A love that transcends circumstance, that transcends human emotion. A love that at the same time embraces the entire spectrum of my experience. As I look with the eyes of love into my heart, I behold the beautiful rainbow of emotion, from ecstasy, joy, wonder, all the way to grief, to anger, to fear. For what are these but emotions that are contained within a broader spectrum? I am empowered. I am empowered by the divine spirit within me, the Christ light, the Buddha light, the light of God that strengthens me, that emboldens me, that encourages me to embrace the full spectrum of love, to access the deepest emotions, the hardest emotions to look at, because it is there with the energy of love that I am healed, that my mind is renewed, and in that I can be a force for healing in the world. But I know that the work begins with myself. As within, so without. I breathe. I breathe in the strength of God, knowing that I have all I need to do this work, that I am supported, guided, and strengthened as I practice revolutionary love for myself, and then I can for others. I breathe into silence as I allow myself to be filled with strength, courage, understanding. I am a beloved child of love, and I accept the fullness of that love in the silence. And as I receive, I follow the guidance of ancient prophets who advised to put on the full armor of God. And so today I put on the full armor, the shield of love, the helmet of wisdom, the garments of courage and strength, and the shield of divine protection. As I enter into the most sacred place to do this work, my own heart and soul, I am grateful for the opportunity to have this adventure of revolutionary love. And so it is. I breathe. I become aware of my physical presence as I return to this now moment. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you, Gordon. You know, as we prepare to give out our version of revolutionary love, we practice that law of giving and receiving. And so now we'd like to participate in the giving part of that equation by sharing our tithes and love offerings in our sacred exchange. You can make that exchange by going to the Unity of Joplin website, unityofjoplin.org. Hit that donate button in the upper right-hand corner, and you know that your gift is made safely and securely through our online system. If you're also interested, we lovingly receive snail mail at our post office box there on the screen. And you can give instantly by texting GIVE to the number there in front of you. This is such an honor to participate in this exchange as we are filled up, fueled up, it overflows, and we just naturally want to give back. And I am so grateful that we have all of these ways that we can do that. I'm also grateful that we get to bless these gifts for their good in the community and the region with our prosperity blessing. So if you'd symbolically hold those gifts in your hands and heart and join me as we affirm, in a universe overflowing with the allness of God, all of the needs of the Unity of Joplin and those we serve are bountifully met. From every direction, known and unknown, expected and unexpected, our abundant good is here now. And we say, thank you, God. Thank you, God, because we know that these tithes and offerings are dedicated to the will and work of Spirit through Unity of Joplin and for the highest good of all. Thank you, God. All right. We are going to move on with another musical offering from Gary and Jerry, and then we'll move right into Reverend Gordon's lesson this morning.
God on high, hear my prayer in my need. You have always been there. He is young, he's afraid. might have known if God had granted me a son. The summers die one by one, how soon they fly, on and on, and I am old and will be gone. Bring him peace, bring him joy, bring him home, bring him home.
Oh, thank you to our music team and to Ani DeFranco, who I'm going to confess I did not know until this week. But she graciously allowed us to use that song and that clip. And I got to know a little bit about her, and she is an amazing human being. And with our music, it's all about bringing home. But bringing who home? Having justice and mercy for whom? Revolutionary love for whom? This series is about changing the world. You know, as I shared last week, as a nation, as a culture, as a species, these last several years, we have been going through a very dark time. And as we in the West are approaching this celebration that we have every year called Easter, we cannot help but wonder, could this be the most important Easter season in the last 100 years? You know, Easter is about resurrection. It's about rebirth. And in Unity, we don't see it so much as about the resurrection or rebirth of one human being who lived a long time ago, although we do acknowledge that and honor that sacrifice. But it is about the example, the teaching that that person, Jesus the Christ, brought to us. That teaching that we are designed as individuals, as a species, as nations, as cultures, to constantly be rising up, to consciously be growing and evolving. And here now, after these last several years, and certainly after this last year, we have to ask ourselves, has this time that we have spent been a time of being in the tomb or in the womb? If it's in the womb, what are we giving birth to now? If it was a time spent in the tomb, what is going to rise out of that tomb as the light begins to return? What has this experience been really about? You know, as I think about the books that I have read the last several years, books like How to Be an Anti-Racist, The Art of Nonconformity, Three Little Zeros, Anti-Fragility, and of course, See No Stranger, I cannot help but realize that something has been happening. Something has been occurring, not just for me, but for the whole human species, and certainly for those of us here in the West. Think about the movements that have emerged. Moms Demand Action, Black Lives Matter, the various women's movements, the Me Too movement, the Occupy movements, and the movements that are counter to a lot of what we stand for. It's interesting that they have arisen at the same time too. Movements like the white supremacist movements, the Proud Boys, the fascists. It's very obvious to me that humanity is going through a time of more than just that overused word paradigm shift. We are going through a mega shift. We are going through a massive step in our evolution as a species. And as I said last week, that will not happen unless we are willing to take an honest look at where we have been, how we got there, how we got here, why we got there, and what we must do in order to heal, in order to grow, in order to decide that this dark night of the soul we have been experiencing is the prelude to the birth of something wonderful. And like all births, it involves labor. It involves even some pain. It involves a choice. So this series that we are doing, based on the book by Valerie Kaur, See No Stranger, A Manifesto of Revolutionary Love, is not about making a blind choice. It is about making a conscious decision and saying, I will embrace revolutionary love. I will do more than just talk about it. I will do more than just read about it. I will do the work. My prayer is that as a species, we do it. My prayer is that we within the unity movement will be some of the leaders in this movement. You know, I know many people come to Unity to have a nice, happy Sunday morning experience. And if that is you, fine, wonderful. That is awesome. We do want a fine, wonderful, happy experience in life. But those experiences also require work. And so this is going to be an experience like that. Last Sunday was the introduction. This Sunday, we get into the really deep, dark work. But remember, darkness is not bad. Darkness is where the space for light is. Darkness is the realm of infinite potential. And so we're going to learn some new things today. We're going to admit some errors. We're going to really see what we need to shift as a people, as a culture, as a nation. And we're going to be honest. And notice, as I said last week, that I use the word honest in this series a lot. This is the time when we get authentic. This is the moment in unity and in movements like ours and in like-minded people where we say, we are going to change. It's about national honesty and integrity. It's about cultural honesty and integrity. And it's about individual honesty and integrity. It won't always be fun, but it will bring about that mega shift. You ready? And I promise you, it gets better. It gets better. If you're a Star Wars fan, you remember way back in 1977, we started with A New Hope. And then we went into The Empire Strikes Back. And then we went into The Return of the Jedi. Well, this is the Empire Strikes Back segment. Hang in there, though, because the Jedi return. So, let's start. Last week, we began becoming aware of what it is that we are working with. And we became aware of a definition of revolutionary love as the ethic that has anchored the nonviolent movements of reformers throughout history, involving the choice to enter into wonder and to labor for others, for our opponents and for ourselves to heal. We must be willing to labor so that we may transform the world around us. The author explains that this revolutionary love is not a formal code or a prescription for life. It's an orientation to life that is personal, that is political, that is rooted in joy. Moreover, it's a force for justice that can only be practiced in community. Last week, we began with part 1, where we explored the first element of this, called wonder. Wonder. That childlike wonder that causes us to say, what is that? Who are you? Why do you think and believe and feel the way you do? She explained that this comes out of her practice of Sikhism, which calls us to be open and curious about others. The saying, see no stranger, is from the Sikh tradition. And it comes from their founder, Guru Nanak, who believed that everyone around him was a part of him. Wonder is our birthright. It's a way of being in the world that opens our hearts and our minds and allows us to discover and to grow, including gaining information about how to understand and appreciate and ultimately love others and ourselves and even our enemies. Failure to wonder, the fear of the unknown, in contrast, locks us into our stories of separation. It disables our capacity for empathy, which is the beginning of any practice of nonviolence. So today, we're going to get into the first of the more difficult steps and the hardest of the difficult steps. We're going to learn that in order to see no stranger, we must be willing to grieve with, fight with, and for others a bit longer than usual. And this lesson is going to be a bit longer than usual, but I invite you to listen with wonder and to really let it sink in. The author recounts how on 9/11, she was a young adult working on her degree, her law degree, and because she was a Sikh, because she was a woman of color, and despite the fact that she was a third generation of American, she immediately, after the events of 9/11, became a suspect, became a target. She's part of the only religious group in North America that wears turbans as part of their religion. And so she was identified as an object of hate or fear. Even though Sikhs were in no way involved with the events of 9/11. In fact, they served as security in the World Trade Center. Many of them died that day. And they are a peace-loving people and a people who accept all paths and all traditions and all ways of that people show up in wondrous diversity. But she, like her brother and sisters, became targets of hate. And she began to realize that something was very wrong with our culture. And that shift was further cemented when just a few days after 9/11, she received a phone call telling her that a person that had grown up as part of their family, that she had grown up with as part of her family, a person she saw as an uncle, a person she loved deeply, was killed by a lone gunman as he was planting flowers in front of his gas station in Mesa, Arizona, only because he wore a turban. In her grief, she realized she had to do something. And she wrote, "I didn't know how to stop the hate, the violence, but I knew that there must be something I can do." And as someone who had studied journalism and somebody who was studying law, she decided that the one thing she could do was to document these events so that she could bring them to the attention of the authorities, but more important, to the attention of people like you and me, so that we could see what needed to be seen. So with her camera, her Honda Civic, and a friend, she set out across the country. Into the thick of mourning and the heat of the nationalistic fervor, she wrote, she and her cousin spent months driving across America, following news of hate crimes as they popped up in each state. And they stopped and interviewed the victims and the communities and the families, catching the stories. And she notes that the beatings, the shootings, the stabbings were mostly reported as isolated incidents. But the FBI would later release a report that in the days and the years following 9/11, there was a 1,600% increase in hate crimes in America, mostly against Muslims and Sikhs and people of color. A number that reflects only a fraction of the violence that actually occurred, because so many incidences were not reported or were not reported as hate crimes. And they didn't involve only Muslims or Sikhs. They involved Christian Arabs, South Asian Hindus, Black Americans, Native Americans, who ironically were constantly being told to go back to their own country. But the most consistent and immediate targets for that hate were the Sikh community, the only people, as I said, who wear turbans in North America. She recounts the countless heartbreaking stories. And she wrote, "I was learning how to witness emotions without getting overwhelmed with them, when I wanted to shut down, I tried again to wonder about the person in front of me and to ask the next question. And her own understanding of the healing power of shared grieving began to unfold as she documented the story of her uncle, of his life and of his death and of the loss to his community. It wasn't very long after that she took a trip back to India, where her ancestors came from. She was third generation America, but her ancestors were from India. And her aunt had gone back to India after her husband was murdered in Mesa. And she went back to see her. And she writes, after crying and hugging together and after offering the only thing we can do in such times, the acknowledgement of loss and grief, I asked her if there was anything she would like to tell the people of America. And expecting and feeling my own bitterness, I was unprepared for the response my aunt gave as she dried her tears and said, I can never forget the love that the people of the community showed me. I can never forget the love that the Americans in our community showed me. They did as much for me as they could. They gave me so much love. I had no friends or community there, I thought, but everyone gathered together, Hindu, Muslim, Christian. Everyone was crying. I want to thank America for loving me. And Kaur was left to wonder, why did so many people come together to grieve with this Sikh wife and the community in Mesa and Phoenix, while in the wake of other hate crimes across the country, that was not the experience. The victims, the survivors, were left alone with their pain. And she realized that what the difference was, that her uncle and his gurdwara, which is their word for ashram or community, had begun shortly before that event, before 9/11 ever happened, a massive media campaign to introduce the people of the community to Sikhism, to let them understand who they were. And he was hoping to prevent exactly the kind of misunderstanding and violence that he experienced. Because of that, in that community, 3,000 people came together for his memorial. And that outpouring of love, the author wrote, was enough to change his wife's experience of loss. She bore the pain, but she didn't bear it alone. She shared it with people she had met and people she had never met before, saying they didn't even know me, but they cried with me. And that sparked a wonder in Valerie Kaur. It sparked a wonder in this American community that drew them close together, that allowed them to support one another. Their act of love was a balm to the aunt. But community made it possible for her to breathe and to learn to live with her wound without creating wounds for others, without dividing her world into us and them. Kaur writes that some forms of grief are impossible to bear alone. In the wake of trauma, when it feels like we are thrown into a hole, we need to be able to tell the story of what happened in order to return to a sense of community. We must be able to say, this was wrong, and it must not happen again. We must be able to tell the story because that is a prerequisite for justice. But for that story to matter, someone we trust must be willing to listen. And that is what we are called to do as agents of revolutionary love. We are called to bear witness to pain, to others' pain, and even, and most importantly, maybe, to our own pain, because we cannot be effective in helping others embrace theirs if we can't do it for ourselves. It's kind of like putting the mask on in the airplane. You know what the stewardesses tell you? Put your mask on first, because you are no good to the person next to you if you can't breathe. So breathe. Take a breath. Take a breath. As we look upon the rise of white supremacy we have seen in our culture, of authoritarianism, of hate crimes. Hindsight reveals to us that our response, our government's response and our response to the events of 9/11 have initiated a contraction of civil and human rights that continues 20 years later, and that was so profound that it altered the very path we were on as a people. Think about this. A whole generation has grown up without ever seeing America that was at least working towards progress, that was working towards becoming better and more than we had been. A whole generation has never seen that. The author writes, today's Americans are 7 times more likely to be killed by a white right-wing extremist than a terrorist who kills in the name of a religion. And Muslim and Sikh Americans specifically are 5 times more likely to be targets of hate than they were before 9/11. A new generation of our young people have no memory of what it was like before that, before the threat of hate was so braided into our daily lives. You know, I think about a young man named Kyle Rittenhouse. You know the name. He went to Kenosha, Wisconsin, as part of a white supremacist movement. 17 years old, and committed murder in the name of hate. Yes, we abhor the crime, but I wonder, what was the environment that created that? How damaged was this child that he was able to do something like that? When a nation collectively condones the stripping of civil and human rights as a group, it delineates who is acceptable to hate. I recently read a quote by the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire, who calls this critical consciousness, the internal shift of awareness, the realization of personal agency when we tap into our own power, our own capacity to change the world, because we realize that something has gone wrong. And that awakening feels like stepping out of a tomb. So what does it mean? What does it mean if we are going to choose to practice revolutionary love? If we are going to choose, and I struggle with this term, but if we are going to choose to be warrior sages, I struggle with it not because of the term itself, but because I'm getting really tired of the word warrior. Maybe we can come up with something different. But what will we risk? Who will we stand with? Who will we stand in front of to protect? This work begins with honoring the impulses we have within ourselves. Think about what breaks your heart. You know, so many times over the last 20 years, we have had to do special services and meditations when there's been mass shootings, when there's been hate crimes. And we feel that pain. I know what it likes to feel when your fists clench and your jaws close and your pulses quickens, and we want to fight back. And we have this idea that we're somehow supposed to deny that feeling, that we're not supposed to feel that. We're unity people. We're supposed to be centered and poised and peaceful and calm all the time. I'm here to tell you that that is very unhealthy. It is not authentic. There are times when all of us, the best of us, the worst of us, those of us who are on the path of spiritual growth, feel anger. We feel grief. We want to lash out. And sometimes we do. And sometimes we post things on Facebook we later regret. Been there, done that. How do we embrace that in a way that allows us to tend the wound, to heal, and to become agents of healing? Well, Kaur invites us to ask 4 questions. 4 questions. And she comes from the Sikh tradition, so I'm going to use some of the words she uses and then explain them. She says the first question is, what is our kirpan? A kirpan is a sword. And that sword is, what can we use to fight on behalf of ourselves and of others? What is our pen? What is our voice? Excuse me, our voice, our art. What is our pocketbook? What is our presence? What are the tools that we have? Well, we begin where we are, right where we are, in our homes, in our campuses, in our communities, in our churches, on the front lines or behind the scenes. We all have a kirpan. What is our dal, our shield? What can we use to protect ourselves and others when the fight is dangerous? We can use our cameras, our legal counsel, our group of allies and supporters, our public witnesses. Yes, safety matters for ourselves and for others. The next question is, what is our delubra? A delubra is our instrument. It's a stringed instrument in the Sikh tradition. It was designed to be small enough for soldiers to carry on their backs into the battlefield in ancient times, to lift their music, to lift their spirits in music, song, and poetry. So for us, what centers us? What brings us peace? What brings us breath? What brings us healing? Is it singing, dancing, drumming, yoga, prayer? And finally, what is our sangat, our sacred community? Well, maybe it's our unity community. Maybe it's our family. Maybe it's our ashram. Maybe it's our spiritual community, whatever that may be. We only need 3 kinds of people in our lives. We need someone who sees the best in us, someone who is willing to stand beside us, and someone who can fight for us when we need help. We can bring those people together when we've created a pocket of revolutionary love. And those pockets then join together into bigger pockets, and they join together into backpacks and into suitcases and into barrels and into containers that eventually encompass whole communities, whole cities, maybe whole nations. How do we tend the wound then once we have our instruments? We do it through 3 practices: rage, listening, and reimagination. That probably sounds a little weird. In unity, talking about rage. And that's the step we're going to focus on for the rest of our lesson today. Rage. Rage is something we totally misunderstand. And yet, if you think about our great teachers that have gone before us, they demonstrated what role rage can play in spiritual evolution. Think about Jesus. Did you know he had a moment of rage? Probably more than one, but one specific one. I bet you know what it is. It is that moment when he entered the temple and saw the hypocrisy and the greed and the avarice that was going on inside this sacred place. And he overturned the tables and drove the money changers out of the temple. But before he did that, he did something else. He went outside the temple, went out of the city into the fields. And he gathered together grass and wove it into a whip. Then he went back in and drove the money changers out. Now I want you to think about something. That whip that he wove, I've done this, woven a whip out of grass just to see what it was like. It was part of an assignment one time in Unity as I was going through Unity school. And I will tell you, it's really, 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 really hard to hurt anybody with a whip of grass. And it takes a lot of time to build it, to make it. What the rage manifested as, probably he walked in, and I don't see Jesus as a small, scrawny guy. He was big and strong and powerful. And he walked into that temple and overthrew the tables, and the people were scared and they went running out. It wasn't the whip that did it. That whip was kind of just something to shake. It was the emotion, the energy. Our culture does not allow for that. We're taught growing up, be good little boys and girls, especially girls. Girls are so not allowed to exhibit this. And men, no, men do have certain rights. We're macho. We can be angry. We can be mad. We can yell and scream and beat our chests. And yeah, guys, you know what it is. How many of you women, though, I'm wondering, click the sad emoji on Facebook when you really want to click the angry one? That's the culture we have. We have to learn how to embrace rage, how to use rage, how to let it happen in ways that are constructive. The opposite of love is not hate. And some people say, well, the opposite of love is fear. No, it's not. The opposite of love is indifference. Love engages all the emotions. Love is a spectrum. You notice that love is the only emotion that is also one of our 12 powers? Have you ever thought about that? Love it's a broad spectrum, and it runs from rage and grief and anger and fear all the way up to joy and ecstasy. That whole spectrum is love. Joy is a gift of love. Grief is the price of love, and anger is the force which protects that which is loved. And by denying that part of the spectrum, anger and rage, we cut ourselves off from the ability to fully love others or even ourselves. There's nothing new in this. It's what the mystics and the teachers and the sages have called down through history shadow work. So to become agents of revolutionary love, we have to do that work. We have to embrace that part of the spectrum, which means we have to learn to express our own grief, and then we can grieve with strangers and others. We have to be able to share our vulnerabilities in order to create connection instead of division. Learning to embrace our own anger or rage allows us to transform it into constructive energy which delivers life instead of death. Kaur's experiences that she recounts in the book chronicle her path to this realization. And I'm going to cut this way short, but it's important. When she was a young teenager, she was molested by a cousin. And she escaped, and she went back the next day and confronted him. And he apologized and broke down and was filled with remorse. And she ended up consoling him, reasoning, after all, he hadn't raped her. He had merely molested her. And she buried the rage and the trauma deep within her. Unknowingly, but she did. In 2004, as a young student, she was covering the Republican convention in New York City as a legal observer appointed by the city of New York to monitor the interactions between the protesters and the police to ensure that they were being done properly by both sides. But there was a sweep of protesters, and she was caught up in it. And though she had a badge, big, huge badge on it that said legal observer, she was handcuffed with zip ties, tied so tightly around her wrist that it cut into her forearms and injured her severely. And she was dragged off, screaming in pain, and thrown into jail in New York. She was brought in front of a lieutenant, and when she complained about the extreme pain and she was bleeding from these zip ties, he laughed and walked behind her and jerked her arms up so that they cut even deeper. And she passed out from the pain. She awoke sometimes later, she recounted, in a jail cell chained to other prisoners who also were bleeding and in pain and pleading for help. None was ever proffered. Eventually, she was bailed out and released. And with her arms in slings, she went back to her life. But her left arm in particular, got worse and worse until it was eventually paralyzed and hung limp at her side. She tried Western medicine. She tried acupuncture. She tried doing emotional healing herself. She tried going to professionals. She tried everything she could think of. And nothing healed her arm. Of course, she reasoned, well, others were hurt worse than I shouldn't complain. And she did have compassion for those, but she could not find compassion for herself. And she began to realize that what she was feeling more than anything else was shame. But she didn't know why she was feeling that. She attended loving compassion workshops. She did practice Buddhism, meditations, things like, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be safe, may I be at peace. And they helped, but her arm was not healed. She tried acting in a play about Abu Ghraib, and that did not help, thinking that, well, maybe if I can immerse myself in the pain of others, that will help me to overcome this. And it was after almost a year of working with this, trying to figure out what was wrong, what was really wrong, and why she wasn't being healed, that she received a phone call from her former advisor at Stanford University, Tommy Woon, who is Dean of Multicultural Education and a trailblazer in healing historical trauma. And he said, I have heard what you have been going through, and I would like to help. And he explained to her that she did not need to relive her trauma to have healing. She needed to access it and its corresponding emotions. She needed to reclaim her agency in mind and body. And so he worked with her and took her back to the experience of being in that police station. And he said, now I want you to imagine that you are standing in front of that lieutenant who injured you so grievously. And I want you to imagine that you are a fierce tiger. What would you do? Contrary to her Sikh training, contrary to the cultural environment that she had grown up in, she said, I'm a tiger. I will rip him to shreds. I will devour him. And she experienced that through the power of imagination. And it went against everything she had been taught as a Sikh about growing up a good little girl in Western society. But she did it. And when she was done, her friend said, so what do you see in front of you now? And she said, well, I see the pile of bloody clothes, but I don't see the lieutenant lying there dead. In fact, I see him standing alongside of this as a scared, injured person. But the injuries are not by me. The injuries were there before I attacked him. I see a destroyed man, a destroyed white man who has his own pain and knew no other way than to take it out on those who were more vulnerable than he was. I see a product of a system that sanctions routine violence as an outlet for rage. And then she realized that she had not destroyed the man in her imagination, but the projection of that person as a monster having power over her. She did the same thing through the power of imagination with her cousin that had molested her. And her arm was healed. She regained full use of it. What happened? What happened? Well, she realized that what happens when we repress anger, what happens is we destroy ourselves. Repressing anger comes at a high cost. High rates of autoimmune disease, physical pain, organ degradation. And if it happens to individuals, what happens then to nations that repress anger? Do you know since we have repressed, we never grieved 9/11 properly as a nation. And since then, we have seen higher rates of violence against those who are unable to defend themselves. School shootings, mosque attacks, ashram attacks, Jewish temple attacks, attacks on people having fun at nightclubs, and even the storming of capitals are the result of not allowing ourselves to experience grief as a people. The opposite of repression is also dangerous. We've created a culture where it is acceptable for angry people, specifically angry white people, men in particular, to unleash their rage without consequence. And of course, this is exasperated by the profusion of guns. So what is the solution then? Obviously, repressing grief and anger does not work. But creating safe containers And exercises that allow rage to be processed and released without harm to self and others can. Space to weep, to dance, to meditate, to scream, create art, to drum. The list is virtually endless. Whatever allows us to fully express and own our own pain, our own wounds, allows us to release energy that otherwise becomes toxic. And what happens when we can do that? We can then ask, what information does our rage contain? What is it telling me to do? How can I harness this energy that is rage into life-giving energy rather than life-destroying energy? These are the questions that we're going to explore in the weeks ahead. These are the questions that lead us to resurrection, that lead us to birth. Think about the Easter story with Jesus. He underwent intense pain and agony. And I'm sure there was rage in there. How did he process that? We don't know how he processed that between the time he was arrested and the resurrection. But I promise you, if he had not, there would not have been a resurrection. On the human level, there had to have been something that happened, something that was done. Maybe in the Catholic and Episcopal prayers I grew up with, in the stories where they say after he was taken down from the cross, he descended into hell. Maybe that was the work. Maybe that was the work his spirit was doing. This work, dealing with the rage and the grief so that he could resurrect. We have that same opportunity. So the questions that we ask will lead us full circle. They will lead us through this experience, and today is the hardest day, I promise you. Will lead us through this experience to rebirth and resurrection to a higher place. They will lead us back to wonder and forward into learning to listen. And then we can reimagine our world. Alyssa will be exploring that with you for the next 2 weeks while I am gone. And so in closing, as I was writing this, I couldn't help but think about a passage in 1 Corinthians by Paul. You know the one. 13, if you want to look it up. Love never fails. Where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be still. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. Maybe those prophecies, maybe those sayings, the tongues and the knowledge, is these false ideas we have grown up with that we cannot engage, that we should not engage the full spectrum of our love, the grief, the anger, the full emotion, the rage. Maybe those were the false prophecies. Maybe the true teaching is, yes, embrace our wholeness. And then we can know fully. Paul wrote, we know now in part, and we only prophesy in part. But when we are complete, when completeness comes, that part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. But now I become a man. Now we become fully human when we do this work. In our childishness, we would not look at this end of the spectrum. But in our adulthood, we can. We can put away the ways of the child and embrace the full human. Right now, we see in the mirror only a dim reflection. But as we shine the light into darkness, the full reflection is illumined, and we see face to face, and we know fully. In this work, 3 things remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. Full spectrum love. The whole thing. And I'll end today with a question from the book. How do we hold others and ourselves accountable for the wrongdoing that we have done, that has been done, and yet at the same time remain in touch with our humanity and their humanity enough to believe in the capacity to be transformed? Namaste.
Wow. You guys, wow, what deep thoughts. And Gordon, I'm hoping that maybe you and Michael can get that last question. Would you post that in our Facebook group? That's really a lot to take in, but I think it's an important one.
I'll do it right now.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I really want to do some journaling around that for sure. And so, yeah, it's hard work. It's necessary work. And if it's been hard for you to hear this lesson this morning, I want you to know that we have a chaplain team standing by to support you as we move through these lessons and look at some of this deeper shadow work. And I agree, it is necessary if we are to transform and resurrect. And now we are wanting to say hello to our visitors. If you have landed here on our page, you have found Unity of Joplin in Joplin, Missouri. We're so grateful to have you. And yeah, we can all use some support as we move through this life together. We're happy to do that for you. Please stay in touch through the Facebook page and through our website, unityofjoplin.org. And we'd also love to bless our children. We envision more and more children knowing the truth within themselves that is finding our community to support them in growing and expressing that truth. And so let's just picture the kids coming, and then let's also honor that inner child, especially that inner child that is feeling the rage and upset that Gordon talked about. Let's just share some love and blessings to these spirits with our children's blessing. Children, you are a perfect child of God. And God and I love you just the way you are. Just the way you are. So true. Thank you. We'll now circle up for our peace song and our prayer of protection.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. With God as Creator, we are family. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow. To take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally.
And as we breathe into this, we know that through this work, through every moment of every day, through every experience we have, the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. For wherever we are, God is. Amen.
And all is well.
Mm.